The spaceport was louder than usual. Ships came and left every minute, their engines shaking the floor and filling the air with smoke. John sat on a bench, waiting for his boarding call. His eyes scanned the crowd. He had traveled before, but this place was different. Thousands of aliens moved around him, tall ones with glowing skin, short ones with claws, and strange creatures with masks covering their faces. Humans were rare here, and John felt their stares every time he moved. He leaned back and tried to relax, but something kept pulling his attention. He noticed two figures moving slowly through the crowd. They looked nervous, their steps light, their heads turning in every direction. They were girls, young but not human. Their eyes were large and silver, their skin pale like moonlight, and their clothes were worn and torn as if they had been running for days. They didn't look like normal travelers. They looked lost. The girls stopped near John. At first, he thought they would pass by, but then one of them leaned close. Her voice was almost a whisper, soft enough that only he could hear. "We can't afford tickets," she said, her accent sharp but clear, "but we'll compensate you." John froze. He blinked at her, not sure if he had heard correctly. The second girl lowered her head, her hands trembling as if she was ashamed of even asking. The words echoed in his head. "We'll compensate you." What did that mean? Money? Something else? His instincts told him there was danger in those words. He looked around quickly. No one seemed to notice, but he felt a strange tension, like eyes were watching from the shadows. "What do you mean?" he asked carefully, his voice low. The first girl's lips pressed tight, then she whispered again. "Please, help us. We cannot buy tickets, but we can give you something valuable. You will not regret it." Her silver eyes shined with desperation, not lies. John's heart beat faster. He knew enough about alien stations to understand one rule: never get involved with strangers who looked too desperate. It often led to trouble, but something about them pulled him in. Their fear was real, their voices almost broken. "Why me?" he asked. The second girl raised her head just enough to show her face. "Because you are human," she said simply. "No one suspects humans. They will not search you like they search us." Her words were sharp, and John felt his chest tighten. Who were they? Who was hunting them? And why hide behind him, a human stranger? He wanted to walk away, but his curiosity chained him to the spot. Suddenly, a shadow passed over the bench. John glanced up and saw two armored enforcers walking across the hall. Their black suits glowed faintly, their helmets covering their faces. They moved with the precision of hunters, scanning the crowd with bright red lenses. The girls lowered their heads quickly, trying to disappear into the sea of people. Now John understood. They were not just poor travelers. They were fugitives, and the hunters were already here. The first girl pressed her hand against John's sleeve, her touch light but shaking. "Please," she begged again, her voice trembling. "Just help us pass the gate. That is all. Then we will give you what we promised." John looked at her hand, then back at the enforcers. Every instinct in him screamed to leave, to stand up and disappear into the crowd. This was not his problem. But her grip tightened, and her eyes locked onto his. It was not just fear in them. It was trust, fragile but real. The loudspeaker above called out another boarding number. The crowd shifted, hundreds moving at once. The noise grew heavier, making it harder to think. The enforcers turned down the main hall, their pace steady, their eyes searching. John swallowed hard. He leaned closer to the girl and muttered, "If I do this and it goes wrong, we're all dead." The girl nodded, her silver eyes never leaving his. "We know." That answer shook him more than anything. They were ready to risk death. That meant what they ran from was even worse. He tried to measure his options. If he refused, maybe the enforcers would grab them, maybe kill them, maybe worse. If he helped, he could be hunted too. But as he looked at their tired faces, the torn edges of their clothes, and the way they tried to hide their fear, he realized something. They had no one else. The second girl finally whispered, almost too quiet to hear, "Please, don't walk away." The words pierced him. He could feel his chest tighten. He stood up slowly, his decision made even though his mind screamed at him. "Fine," he said in a low voice. "Stay close. Don't say a word." Both girls' eyes widened in relief. They nodded quickly, standing up with him. For the first time, John noticed just how small they looked compared to the towering aliens around them. Fragile, like birds hiding in a storm. He walked into the crowd, and they followed silently at his heels. The enforcers turned their heads, scanning, their red lenses sweeping over the people like searchlights. John's palms grew sweaty. He felt as if any wrong step would expose them. The station's noise filled his ears, but under it, he kept hearing that whisper again. "We can't afford tickets, but we'll compensate you." He still didn't know what they meant. He didn't know what kind of danger he had just accepted. But there was no turning back now. As the three of them moved deeper into the crowd, one of the enforcers suddenly paused, its red lenses fixed in their direction. John felt his blood turn cold. The girls froze behind him. For a second, time itself seemed to stop. The enforcer tilted its head, then continued walking, its heavy boots echoing against the metal floor. John let out a slow breath he didn't realize he was holding, but he knew this was only the beginning. Something dark was following these girls, and now it was following him too. John kept moving through the crowd, forcing his legs to stay steady while his mind raced with questions. The two alien girls walked close behind him, their small steps almost silent. They kept their heads down, hiding their faces beneath their ragged hoods. He could feel their fear like a cold wind on his back. Every time he glanced over his shoulder, he expected to see the armored enforcers pushing through the sea of travelers. He finally reached a quieter corner of the spaceport, near a row of broken vending machines and a flickering light. Here, fewer people passed by. The noise of the crowd softened, replaced by the low hum of ships leaving the docks. He stopped and turned to face them. "Talk," he said firmly. "What's going on? Why are they after you?" The girls looked at each other, uncertain if they should speak. The first girl, the one who had whispered to him before, lowered her hood. Her silver eyes glimmered under the weak light, and her pale skin looked even more fragile now. "They will kill us if they find us," she said quietly. "We escaped from them." "Escaped from who?" John pressed. The second girl's voice shook when she answered. "The enforcers. They work for someone powerful. A noble. We belonged to him." John's stomach twisted. Belonged. That one word carried chains with it. "Slaves?" he asked. The first girl nodded, her lips trembling. "Yes, we were taken young, sold to him. We cleaned his halls, served his meals, obeyed his every command. But then," she swallowed hard, "he wanted more. Things we could not give. We ran away before he could break us." For a moment, John said nothing. The truth hit him like a heavy weight. They weren't just runaways without money. They were fugitives from someone with power and reach. If this noble truly wanted them back, no corner of the galaxy would be safe. "You expect me to help you," John said slowly. "When half the station is probably watching for you, why not ask someone of your own kind?" The second girl shook her head, her silver eyes filling with tears. "Because no one would. To help us is to anger the noble, and to anger him is to die. Humans are the only ones who are ignored here. They don't see you as a threat. They will not watch you closely. Please, you are our only chance." Her voice cracked at the end, and she clutched her sister's hand tightly. John's jaw clenched. He wanted to walk away. Every word they spoke tied him deeper into something dangerous. But he also knew what it felt like to be powerless. He had seen it on Earth before, the strong crushing the weak, the rich buying the poor. He had sworn to himself he would never look away again. "What do you mean by compensation?" he asked at last, lowering his voice. "You keep saying it. What exactly are you offering me?" The first girl stepped closer. Her voice was little more than a whisper. "Information. Secrets no one else knows. He told us things when he thought we were nothing. We listened. We remembered. We carry knowledge that could destroy him." John narrowed his eyes. "And if I take you to safety, you'll give it to me?" She nodded. "Every detail. We cannot pay you with credits, but this is worth more than money. It can save lives." John studied her face. There was no sign of a lie. Fear? Yes. Desperation? Yes. But not deception. Still, it was a dangerous promise. Information against a noble meant drawing blood, and blood always called for more blood. Before he could respond, he caught movement at the edge of his vision. He glanced toward the main hall and froze. The enforcers were there again, scanning the crowd with their glowing red lenses. One of them paused, its head tilting slightly, as if it had caught a faint trail. The girls stiffened, their hands gripping each other so tightly their knuckles turned white. John raised a hand quickly. "Stay calm," he whispered. "Don't run." His mind raced. If the enforcers saw them huddled here, it would be over in seconds. He needed to act, to blend them back into the flow of the station. He grabbed the broken vending machine's side panel and pretended to check it. To anyone watching, it looked like he was scolding his companions for following him. The enforcers, red gaze swept across the corner. John held his breath, every muscle tight. The first girl leaned close, whispering so softly it was like a ghost in his ear. If they catch us, they won't kill us quickly. They will take us back. Please don't let them. Her words cut deeper than any threat. John forced himself to relax his shoulders, trying to look casual. The enforcer's head tilted again, then turned away. The two armored figures continued down the hall, their boots thudding against the metal floor until they vanished into the crowd. The girls both let out shaky breaths at once. John exhaled too, though slower. His mind was clearer now. He understood one thing. Helping them would not just be about sneaking them through a gate. This was a fight against power, against control. He turned back to them. Listen carefully. If I do this, if I get you past the gates and onto a ship, there's no turning back. You understand? Once I'm in, I can't step away. The first girl met his eyes. There was no hesitation in her silver gaze now. We understand, she said firmly. We will give you everything we know. You will not regret it. John wasn't sure if that was true. He already felt the weight of 1,000 problems settling on his shoulders. But as he looked at them, two frightened girls with nothing left but hope in their eyes, he knew his choice was already made. He straightened his jacket and took a deep breath. All right, he muttered. Stay close. From now on, you follow my lead. If I say move, you move. If I say stop, you stop. One mistake, and we're done. The girls both nodded, their faces pale but determined. John glanced once more toward the hall where the enforcers had disappeared. The danger was growing, step by step, closer and closer. And deep inside, he knew the moment he walked out of this corner, his life would never be the same again. John guided the girls into a darker part of the station, away from the bright signs and noisy travelers. The walls here were old and covered with scratches, the lights above flickering as if they were about to die. The smell of burnt oil filled the air. This was where broken machines were kept, and only a few workers passed by. It was the perfect place to talk without drawing too much attention. He turned quickly, facing them with sharp eyes. Now tell me everything, he demanded in a low but firm voice. No more half-truths. If I'm going to risk my life, I need to know exactly what I'm walking into. The first girl looked down, nervously rubbing her hands together. The second one nodded slowly and whispered, We said we could compensate you. And we meant it. We don't have money. We don't have credits, but we have something more valuable. John crossed his arms, waiting. His heartbeat was steady, but his mind was alert. Every sound from the hall made him glance back to check if enforcers were near. What could you possibly have that's more valuable than money? He asked. You're just runaways. The first girl stepped closer. Her silver eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. We were not only slaves, she said carefully. We were servants inside the noble's palace. He thought we were nothing. He spoke freely in front of us, as if we were invisible. We listened. We remembered. John narrowed his eyes. Remembered what? Secrets, she whispered. Things that could destroy him. The noble is not only powerful, he is planning something dangerous. We know where his weapons are hidden. We know about the deals he made in the dark. We know codes, access points, names of his allies. If you help us escape, we will give this to you. The second girl stepped forward quickly, her voice rising with urgency. This is why we ran, not just to save ourselves. If he succeeds, many will die. Whole colonies may fall under his control. We carry the truth that can stop him. That is our compensation. John stared at them, struggling to believe. Secrets like these were worth more than mountains of gold. But secrets were also deadly. If what they said was true, then carrying them meant carrying a target on his back forever. And how do I know you're not lying? He asked coldly. The first girl's hands trembled, but her eyes didn't leave his. She leaned closer, whispering words in a language John didn't know. They sounded sharp, coded. Then she spoke in common tongue again. That was his personal command phrase. He used it to unlock his private chamber doors. Only his servants know it. Test it if you ever get the chance. You'll see we are telling the truth. John felt a chill run through him. He had no way to check the phrase now, but the way she spoke it, firm, steady, without hesitation, made it feel real. Before he could answer, a sudden noise made all three of them freeze. A patrol drone floated past the end of the hall, its bright red scanner shining over the walls. It was silent except for the hum of its thrusters, moving slow like a predator sniffing the air. The girls pressed against the wall, holding their breath. John pulled a broken panel loose and motioned for them to crouch behind it. The drone hovered closer, its scanner sweeping. The red light passed over the vending machine, then over the floor, stopping dangerously close to where John crouched. He could feel sweat trickling down his neck. If the drone scanned deeper, it would find them in seconds. He grabbed a small metal piece from the ground and tossed it down the hall. The clink echoed loudly. The drone's scanner spun instantly toward the sound and drifted away, chasing the noise. The girls finally let out their breath. Their shoulders sagged in relief, but their eyes were still wide with fear. "You see?" John whispered harshly. "This is what I mean. If you're lying, if I'm risking my neck for nothing, I'll die here, and so will you." The second girl shook her head quickly. "We are not lying. We swear it. We have no one else to trust. If we tell anyone else, they'll sell us back for reward money." "But you're human. You are outside their politics. You are the only one who can carry this." Her words struck him. He hated being dragged into alien games, but she was right. Humans weren't seen as players in these battles. No one expected him to matter. That invisibility gave him an advantage. John rubbed his face with his hand, breathing heavily. He wanted to walk away, to leave them to their fate. But the memory of their eyes, the way they begged him not to abandon them, clung to him. And now, with this talk of weapons and war, he knew this was bigger than just two girls running away. "Fine," he muttered, finally lowering his hand. "If what you're saying is true, then we don't have much time. The Noble's men won't stop. They'll hunt you across every star system until they have you back." The first girl nodded, her lips pressed tight. "We know. That's why we can't stay here. We need to reach a transport, a ship that can take us off this station. Only then can we be safe long enough to tell you everything." John glanced toward the crowded hall again. The drone was gone, but the memory of its red light stayed in his mind. The station was no longer just a place of travel. It had become a cage with hunters waiting at every corner. "All right," he said at last, his voice hard. "I'll help you. But from this moment on, you do exactly as I say. No sudden moves, no talking unless I tell you. Understood?" Both girls nodded quickly, relief flooding their faces. John straightened his jacket, scanning the shadows one more time. He could feel the weight of their secret pressing on his shoulders already. It was dangerous, maybe even suicidal. But he also knew one thing. Once you hear the truth, you can't pretend you didn't. And now he carried it with him, whether he liked it or not. John pushed the girls forward into the main passage, blending them into the stream of travelers. Bright neon signs flashed above, pointing toward different gates. The air smelled of engine fuel and fried food from vendors, and voices overlapped into a constant roar. To any outsider, it was just a busy station. But to John, every face felt like an enemy. Every armored figure in the crowd looked like a hunter waiting for its chance. The girls stayed close, their hoods covering their pale faces. They walked lightly, but their trembling hands gave away their fear. John whispered without looking back, "Stay calm. Don't draw attention. Walk like you belong here." The first girl whispered back, "We never belonged anywhere." Her words were soft, but they cut into him like a knife. John kept his head high, pretending to be an ordinary traveler guiding two companions. It worked for a few minutes. They moved through one long corridor, past blinking gates and impatient crowds. But then, the sound hit him. A metallic stomp, steady and heavy. He froze for a split second before forcing himself to keep walking. He knew that sound. Enforcers. He risked a glance over his shoulder. Two armored figures were moving into the corridor, their glowing red lenses sweeping the crowd. People stepped aside quickly, avoiding them. The enforcers walked like predators that already knew prey was nearby. The girls noticed too. Their steps faltered. The second girl whispered shakily, "They've seen us." "Not yet," John said through clenched teeth. "Keep walking." But he was wrong. The nearest enforcer raised its hand, tapping a control on its wrist. A low alarm tone rang in the air, sharp and threatening. Heads turned. Murmurs spread quickly. The crowd shifted, some curious, some trying to get away. The enforcers were locking down the corridor. "Run," John muttered. The three of them bolted at once. The girls and hoods fell back as they pushed through the startled crowd. John shoved aside a tall alien blocking the way, ignoring the angry shouts. Behind them, the enforcers moved faster, their boots hitting the floor like thunder. Blaster fire cracked. A bolt of red energy tore through the air, striking the wall where John had been seconds before. Sparks exploded, and the crowd screamed, scattering in panic. Alarms wailed louder, echoing through the station. John grabbed the first girl's wrist and pulled her toward a service tunnel marked authorized staff only. The door was half open, and he kicked it wide. "In here!" he shouted. They rushed inside. The tunnel was narrow, filled with pipes and steam leaking from vents. The air was hot and heavy. John slammed the door shut behind them, but he knew it wouldn't hold for long. The girls were panting, their faces pale with fear. "They'll find us," the first girl said. "Not if we move fast," John replied. He pushed them forward. Their footsteps echoed against the metal floor. Behind them, he could already hear the heavy boots of the enforcers entering the tunnel. The narrow passage twisted left and right, pipes hissing as they passed. Steam clouded their vision, burning their skin with heat. The girls coughed but kept moving. John's mind raced. He had no weapons, no allies, just two frightened fugitives who trusted him more than they should. Suddenly, a side door opened ahead. A maintenance worker stepped out, holding a tool pack. His eyes widened at the sight of them. John acted instantly. He shoved the worker back inside, pulling the girls through. "Sorry, urgent repairs," John muttered, slamming the door behind them before the man could react. They found themselves in another dim corridor, lined with broken panels and loose wires sparking from the walls. The hum of the station was louder here, as if they were closer to the engines. John guided them quickly, choosing random paths, hoping to shake their pursuers. But the enforcers were not giving up. The sound of their boots echoed through the metal halls, growing closer. The red glow of their scanners flashed in the distance, cutting through the darkness. The second girl stumbled. John caught her arm, dragging her back to her feet. "Keep moving," he urged. "If you stop, you die." Tears streamed down her face, but she nodded, pushing herself forward. The first girl bit her lip, determination hardening her expression. They reached a fork in the corridor. John hesitated, trying to decide. Left looked darker, almost abandoned. Right carried the faint glow of working lights. He made his choice. "Left," he said, leading them into the shadows. The path grew tighter, the walls closing in. A low alarm echoed behind them, followed by mechanical voices speaking in a language John couldn't understand. The hunt was closing. Then the tunnel ended in a locked gate. John cursed under his breath. "Damn it." He pulled at the control panel, wires sparking under his fingers. Come on! Come on!" The girls looked back, their silver eyes wide. The glow of red scanners reflected off the walls. The enforcers were close. John slammed his fist against the panel. The gate clicked and slid open halfway, sparks raining down. "Through!" he shouted. The girls squeezed through the gap, and John followed, pulling the gate shut behind them. The noise of the enforcers grew louder, but the thick metal would slow them down. At least for a moment. They ran again, breathless and exhausted. The tunnel finally opened into a wider hall filled with blinking machines and rows of unused storage crates. John scanned quickly. There had to be a way out. "There!" the first girl cried, pointing to a ladder leading up to a hatch. John nodded. "Climb." The girls scrambled up, their hands slipping on the cold rungs. John stayed below until they reached the top, his eyes fixed on the shadows behind them. The red glow was already seeping through the cracks in the gate. The hatch groaned as the girls pushed it open, revealing the bright lights of another level above. They climbed out, and John followed, pulling the hatch closed. For a brief moment, they were safe again. But John knew the truth. The chase had only just begun. The enforcers would not stop, and now the entire station was probably on alert. He looked at the girls, both breathing hard, their faces pale but alive. "You wanted my help," he said grimly. "Now you've got it. But this won't end until we're off this station." The first girl met his eyes, her voice steady despite her fear. "Then we must reach the gates. Whatever it takes." John nodded, though his stomach tightened. The gates were crawling with security, scanners, and soldiers. But there was no other path. If they failed, They would all be caught. If they succeeded, the real danger would only begin once they left. And as the sound of heavy boots echoed faintly from below, John realized something else. The enforcers weren't just hunting the girls anymore. They were hunting him too. The new level was darker, quieter, and smelled of rust. The lights above flickered weakly, casting long shadows across the walls. The girls climbed out of the hatch, breathing hard, their eyes darting in every direction. John followed close behind, his chest rising and falling as he tried to catch his breath. For a moment, there was silence. Only the hum of the station's engines far below reminded them that danger had not disappeared. John motioned for the girls to stay low as he scanned the wide hall ahead. Unlike the crowded passages below, this level was nearly empty. Storage crates lined the walls, covered in dust, and old warning signs hung crookedly. It looked like a place no one visited often, which meant it could either be safe or the perfect trap. The first girl pointed nervously to a broken sign that read, "Maintenance Passage 7." Her silver eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. "This way," she whispered. "We used to deliver supplies here. It leads toward the docking bays." John narrowed his eyes. "You've been through here before?" She nodded quickly. "The noble's men made us clean every part of the palace ship. We know back ways. We remember." John hesitated for a moment, then gave a short nod. "Fine, lead the way. But if you hear anything, you stop." They began moving again, their footsteps soft against the metal floor. The second girl kept glancing back, her hands trembling as if she expected the enforcers to appear at any second. John noticed her fear and whispered, "Don't look back. Looking back makes you slower. Just focus on moving forward." She swallowed hard but obeyed, keeping her eyes fixed on her sister's back. The corridor grew tighter as they went deeper, the ceiling dropping low enough that John had to duck. Pipes hissed above, dripping with condensation. Steam rose from vents, making the air heavy. The smell of oil mixed with metal burned his nose. Halfway through the passage, the first girl stopped suddenly. She pressed her ear to the wall. John frowned but stayed quiet. After a moment, she whispered, "They're here. I can hear them. Heavy steps. 2, maybe 3. John stiffened. He pressed his own ear to the cold wall. At first, he heard only the hum of machinery. Then, thump, thump, faint but steady, the sound of armored boots moving slowly, like predators stalking prey. He cursed under his breath. "They're sweeping every level." The girls froze, their eyes wide. Panic shimmered in their expressions. John raised a hand. "Stay calm. Panic will get us killed. We'll move through the maintenance tunnels. Quick and quiet." He led them down a side path, narrower and darker. It was filled with broken panels and twisted wires sparking faintly. The air was warm and smelled of burned circuits. The second girl almost tripped on loose debris, but John caught her arm and pulled her back up. They pressed forward, deeper into the maze of tunnels. But the sound of boots followed, sometimes fading, sometimes growing closer. It was like being hunted by ghosts. They never saw the enforcers, but they could feel them, always just a turn behind. Finally, the passage opened into a wider chamber filled with tall machines. Some were silent, covered in dust, while others clattered and hissed with life. The noise drowned out their footsteps, which gave John some comfort. He motioned for the girls to crouch behind a stack of crates. As they hid, John finally asked the question that had been burning in his mind. "Why are they so desperate to get you back? If it was just slavery, they could replace you with others. What makes you so important?" The first girl's lips pressed tight. She hesitated, but then her sister whispered, "Because of what we heard." John leaned closer. "Tell me." The first girl took a deep breath. "The noble is planning something bigger than anyone knows. He is building ships in secret, arming them with forbidden weapons. He wants to start a war, but not openly. He wants chaos, and he has already made deals with alien warlords. If someone exposes him, it will destroy everything he's built. That's why he needs us silenced." Her words struck John like a blade. He had suspected their secrets were dangerous, but hearing it confirmed made the risk feel heavier. They weren't just running from a cruel master. They were carrying knowledge that could decide the fate of worlds. John rubbed his forehead. "So if I help you escape, I'm not just saving you. I'm putting myself in the middle of a war." The first girl's silver eyes softened. "Yes, and we are sorry, but we have no one else. If you leave us, we die. If you help us, maybe the galaxy lives." Her words hung in the air, heavy and sharp. John wanted to be angry, but he couldn't. They hadn't chosen this. They were victims dragged into something larger than themselves. And now, so was he. Suddenly, a faint hiss echoed through the chamber. John's head snapped up. A red glow appeared between the machines, scanners sweeping the area. The enforcers had arrived. "Move," John hissed. He pushed the girls toward another exit. They darted between the towering machines, ducking low. The hiss of steam and the clang of gears covered their movements. But the red glow was growing brighter. A voice echoed, cold and mechanical. "Unauthorized subjects detected. Do not resist." Blaster fire erupted. Energy bolts cut through the chamber, striking the walls and machines. Sparks flew. The girls screamed but kept running. John grabbed their hands, pulling them faster. Ahead, a narrow service hatch stood open, leading into another tunnel. John shoved the girls inside, then crawled after them just as another blast seared the ground where he had stood. The heat singed his back, but he didn't stop until the hatch clanged shut behind them. The new tunnel was cramped, forcing them to crawl on hands and knees. The air was damp and smelled of mold. Water dripped from above, pattering on their heads. Their breaths echoed loudly in the small space. The second girl whispered shakily, "They won't stop, will they?" John shook his head grimly. "No, not until they've got you, or until we're off this station." Silence followed, broken only by their crawling. The girls were exhausted, but John kept pushing them forward. They could not rest. Not yet. At last, the tunnel opened into a larger shaft with a ladder leading upward. The first girl looked up, her voice trembling but hopeful. "This leads closer to the docking bays. If we can reach the smuggler levels, we might find a ship." John stared up the ladder, then back down the tunnel where faint red glows still flickered. He clenched his fists. Every step forward was harder, but turning back was no longer an option. He motioned for them to climb. "Go. I'll cover you." As they began to climb, John tightened his jaw. The enforcers were relentless, but he had one advantage they didn't: human stubbornness. And he would use it to drag these girls through hell if that's what it took to get them out alive. The ladder creaked as the girls climbed, their hands slipping on the damp metal rungs. John stayed below them, his eyes fixed on the dark tunnel behind. He could still see the faint red glow from the scanners, flickering like hungry eyes waiting to strike. His heart pounded hard, but he kept his voice steady. "Faster. Don't stop." The first girl reached the top and pushed against a small hatch. It groaned loudly, but finally swung open. A rush of colder air swept down the shaft, and carrying with it the smell of fuel, smoke, and metal. She climbed out, followed by her sister. John came last, pulling the hatch shut behind him. They now stood in a wide, dimly lit bay. Rows of cargo crates were stacked high, some marked with alien symbols, others broken open with wires spilling out. A few lights buzzed weakly, making shadows dance across the walls. Engines hummed far away, shaking the floor slightly. John immediately realized they were close to the docking zones. The sound of ships rising and landing was stronger here. The first girl whispered, her silver eyes glowing faintly. "This way. There's a smuggler's dock at the far end. I heard workers speak of it. Ships come and go without checks." John frowned, but nodded. A smuggler's ship was risky, but it was their only hope. No official transport would let them through the gates with enforcers hunting them. They moved carefully between crates, keeping low. Every sound seemed louder in the silence. The scrape of John's boots, the girls' quick breaths, the echo of distant metal clangs. John's instincts screamed that they weren't alone, and he was right. A shadow shifted above them on a high platform. John's hand shot up, signaling the girls to stop. He squinted through the dim light and saw movement. 2 enforcers patrolling the catwalk. Their red scanners swept across the bay, pausing on crates, on doors, on the ground below. The girls crouched low, trembling. The second girl whispered, "They know we're here." John's jaw tightened. "Then we stay one step ahead." He guided them behind a broken crate, pressing his back to the cold metal. The enforcers continued their patrol above, their boots clanging against the steel walkway. For a moment, it looked like they would pass. But then, one of them stopped, its head tilted, the red glow of its scanner sweeping dangerously close to their hiding spot. John's pulse thundered. He needed a distraction, something to pull their attention away. He grabbed a loose piece of metal pipe from the floor and hurled it across the bay. It clattered loudly against the far wall. Instantly, both enforcers turned, their scanners locking onto the noise. Without a word, they marched toward it. "Now," John whispered sharply. He pulled the girls up and hurried them deeper into the bay. They slipped through narrow gaps between crates, out the shadows covering them. The sounds of the enforcers' boots grew faint behind them. For a moment, John allowed himself a breath of relief. But it didn't last. As they reached the far end of the bay, they found a massive steel door, its surface scarred with scratches and burn marks. Next to it was a small control panel, old and rusted. The first girl stepped forward quickly. "I know this place. Workers used to complain about this door. It leads to the smuggler's dock." John pressed the panel, but it didn't respond. "It's locked," he muttered. The girl touched the screen with careful fingers. "I can try. I watched technicians repair it once." "Be fast," John urged, keeping his eyes on the shadows. The girl worked nervously, her hands shaking as she pulled wires from beneath the panel. Sparks jumped out, lighting her pale face. Sweat dripped down her forehead as she whispered, "Almost, almost." Behind them, a loud clang echoed through the bay. John turned sharply. The enforcers were back, their scanners sweeping again. This time, they were moving faster, more certain. The thrown pipe had only delayed them for a few minutes. "Hurry!" John barked. The girl bit her lip, forcing herself to stay calm. At last, the door gave a heavy groan and slid open halfway, sparks falling from its sides. "Go!" she gasped. The second girl ducked through first, John pushing her forward. The first girl slipped in after, and John followed, pulling hard until the heavy door screeched shut behind them. The noise echoed like thunder through the bay, and he knew it had given them away. They now stood in a narrow docking tunnel lit with red emergency lights. The air smelled of oil and smoke. Ahead, at the very end, they could see it. A small, battered ship with markings scratched off, clearly a smuggler's vessel. Its engines hummed softly, ready for departure. The girl's eyes widened with hope. "That's it!" The second girl whispered, "We can make it!" But John saw movement near the ship. A group of rough-looking aliens stood around the ramp, armed with rifles and blades. Smugglers. Their eyes narrowed as they noticed John and the girls approaching. One of them stepped forward, grinning with sharp teeth. "You don't look like our usual clients. And those two." His gaze lingered on the girls, recognition flashing in his eyes. "Ah, now I see. The nobles lost pets." The girls froze, their faces pale with terror. John stepped forward, his voice cold. "We need passage. Name your price." The smuggler laughed. "Price? The price on their heads is worth more than 1,000 jobs. Why should I sell them to you when I can sell them back?" The smugglers raised their weapons, surrounding them slowly. The girls clung to John's arms, whispering in panic, "They'll give us away!" John's mind raced. He had no gun, no backup, only his instincts. He glanced at the ship behind the smugglers, its ramp still open, its engines alive. They were so close. But between them and freedom stood killers who valued money more than mercy. He lowered his voice, speaking only to the girls. "Stay behind me. No matter what happens, don't run until I tell you." The smugglers stepped closer, weapons clicking as they prepared to fire. The leader grinned wider, his teeth shining under the red lights. "Say goodbye, human. You chose the wrong side." John tightened his fists. He had bluffed soldiers, tricked drones, and outrun enforcers, but this was different. Here, words alone would not save them. If they wanted that ship, he would have to gamble everything: his courage, his cunning, and maybe his life. The hum of the smugglers' engines grew louder, vibrating through the floor. The girls trembled, waiting for John's move. He took one deep breath and whispered, "When I say run, you run." And as the smugglers raised their rifles, John's eyes burned with determination. The gamble of their escape was about to begin. The smugglers closed in slowly, their rifles aimed, their eyes sharp with greed. The leader's grin widened, his jagged teeth glinting under the red lights. The girls clung tighter to John, their trembling fingers digging into his sleeves. John's heart pounded hard, but his face stayed calm. He had faced soldiers and hunters before, but here, one wrong move meant instant death. "Last chance, human," the leader said, his voice echoing through the docking tunnel. "Step aside. Hand over the girls. Walk away alive." John didn't move. His voice came out steady, cold. "No." The leader's grin faded into a scowl. "Then you die with them." He raised his hand to signal the attack. At that exact moment, John acted. He grabbed a loose cable lying on the floor and yanked it hard. Sparks exploded, showering the smugglers with bright flashes. The sudden light blinded them for a split second. John shoved the girls down and shouted, "Run!" They bolted forward, their feet pounding the metal floor. John followed, staying between them and the smugglers. Shots rang out, red bolts slicing through the air. One struck the wall beside his head, showering him with burning fragments. Another hit the ground near the girls, making them stumble but not fall. John snatched a metal crate from the floor and hurled it toward the smugglers. It smashed into one of them, knocking him off balance. The rest fired wildly, their shots missing in the chaos. The girls reached the base of the ramp, scrambling up with desperate speed. John was right behind them, but the smugglers were already recovering. The leader roared, firing a blast that struck John's shoulder. Pain burned through him, but he kept moving, teeth gritted against the agony. He pushed the girls up the ramp and spun around, kicking the control panel beside the ramp. Sparks flew, and the metal platform began to rise. The smugglers shouted in anger, rushing forward, but the ramp lifted higher, sealing them out. Shots slammed into the closing hatch, leaving scorch marks, but none broke through. Finally, the ramp locked shut with a heavy clang. Inside, the ship's dim lights flickered. The girls collapsed on the floor, gasping for air, their faces pale with fear. John leaned against the wall, clutching his burned shoulder. His breaths came rough, but his eyes stayed sharp. The ship's engines roared louder, vibrating through the floor. A deep voice crackled over the speakers. "Who in hell are you people on my ship?" John turned to see the pilot, a grizzled alien with one cybernetic eye glaring at them from the cockpit. His clawed hands gripped the controls tightly. "You don't belong here, and I didn't agree to passengers." John forced himself to step forward despite the pain. "You want credits? We'll pay. Just get us off this station. Now." The pilot sneered. "Credits? I don't need credits. You've brought trouble. I should throw you out the airlock." Before John could respond, the first girl stood up. Her voice shook, but carried strength. "We can give you something more than credits. Information, secrets about the Noble. If you help us escape, those secrets are yours too." The pilot froze. His cybernetic eye flickered as he processed her words. "Secrets about him?" "Yes," she said firmly. "We know where his hidden fleets are. We know who funds him. We know his weaknesses. Help us, and you can sell this knowledge to the highest bidder, or use it to destroy him." For a long moment, silence filled the cabin. The engines growled, ready for launch, but the pilot's gaze stayed fixed on the girl. Then, slowly, he leaned back in his chair. "Fine. But if you're lying, I'll space all three of you." John let out a breath of relief. "Just get us out of here." The pilot pulled a lever, and the ship rumbled as it lifted off. Outside, alarms blared across the station. Lights flashed, and the docking tunnel shook. Over the speakers, a harsh voice shouted, "Unauthorized launch detected. All units, intercept." The ship blasted forward, breaking free from the dock. Sirens echoed behind them as the massive station grew smaller in the distance. But freedom was not guaranteed yet. Ahead, 3 sleek enforcer ships appeared, their red lights glowing like predators in the dark. The girls gasped, clutching each other. John stepped into the cockpit, his voice hard. "We can't fight them head on. Outrun them." The pilot growled. "My ship isn't made for outrunning military craft." The first girl suddenly leaned forward. "Wait, we know a code, an override command for their patrol ships. He used it to control them from the palace." John snapped his head toward her. "You're sure it works?" She nodded quickly. "Yes. I remember every word." The pilot snarled. "If this is a trick, we're dead." "Do it," John ordered. The girl closed her eyes, whispering the strange sequence of alien words. The pilot entered them into his console. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the enforcer ships slowed. Their red lights flickered, then dimmed. One by one, they veered off, drifting into the dark, as if suddenly blinded. The girls sagged with relief, tears shining in their silver eyes. John let out a long breath, the weight of the chase finally lifting from his chest. But he knew the truth. This was not the end. The noble would never forgive this humiliation. He would hunt them across stars, burning everything in his path to get them back. The second girl turned to John, her voice soft but filled with gratitude. "You saved us. You could have left us, but you didn't." John shook his head. "I didn't save you. You saved yourselves. I just gave you a chance." The first girl stepped closer, her hand lightly touching his uninjured arm. You have more than given us a chance. By our tradition, we owe you our lives. From this moment, we are bound to you. Her words made John stiffen. He looked at her, unsure what she meant. Bound? She nodded. By alien law, when someone saves us at the cost of his own blood, we become his. Not as property, but as family. You are our protector, and we are your shield. The second girl echoed her sister, her silver eyes shining with determination. We will never abandon you, no matter the cost. John stared at them, speechless. He had only wanted to survive the day. Now, somehow, he had gained two allies whose loyalty went beyond any bargain. Two fugitives carrying secrets that could shake the galaxy. He leaned back against the wall, his shoulder throbbing, but his spirit unbroken. Outside, the stars stretched endlessly, waiting. The girls sat beside him, no longer trembling. For the first time, their fear was replaced with something else. Hope. And John understood that his life would never return to what it was before. He had taken their burden, their secret, and their loyalty. And in doing so, he had declared silent war against a noble who would stop at nothing. The gamble had paid off, but the real fight was only beginning.